Hey, everybody, welcome back to the When Words Don't Come Easy podcast. Today's special guest is phenomenal. You're going to love her. She is a pastor, she's an author, she's a leader of leaders, so many things. I can't wait to dive into her story because it's going to be a blessing to you. But first, we got to hear the theme music. All right. I love it. Love it. Thank you, Mr. Voiceover Guy. So good. Welcome again to the When Words Don't Come Easy podcast. My name is Andy Howard. And if I haven't had the privilege of meeting you, it's an honor to meet you. I always want this podcast to bring hope. And today's guest is just the epitome of that. Her story is hope. We met, for the longest part that we were on staff, and me and Tiffany were on staff in ministry, was under their leadership at their church. And it's just an honor to have her on. We served for, I want to say, almost 10 years in the two stints there. Peyton's incident that you hear about in the book, it happened right in the middle of their leadership. And I can't think of better pastors to be under when we experienced all of that. So without further ado, I want you to hear from Pastor Judy Kennedy in her story. So welcome, Judy. So happy to have you on the When Words Don't Come Easy podcast. And I'm sorry, you are muted right now. There we go.
Hey, I am really glad to be here now. And I love you so much. You guys are like my own kids. I'm just Mama Judy. I'm thrilled to be here. Can't wait to spend some time just talking with you and all your guests.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And I would say, just to give a little bit of background before we dive into some of the heavy stuff, you are, for those who have done some of the I forget what you even call them now, the personality test. You are an otter, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're a 7 on the Enneagram. You're the party person. You bring the fun. So tell a little bit about your personality.
Well, I have a tendency to get out of control, so I have to dial myself back. I'm getting a little older, so I'm learning there has to be a maturity that comes with age, but I don't think fun has to stop. So I'm trying my best to be a good example to the believers, but have a lot of fun while I'm doing it.
Well, you've always brought the fun, and we've always enjoyed having you. That's why this is going to be so fun. And hey, maturity is overrated. So
Absolutely.
but thank you for being here and doing this. And really, there's so many areas we could go with your story. And first of all, I just want to ask, what are you doing now? I know you guys are still pastoring at Mustang Creek in Forney, Texas. But what's going on in the life of Judy Kennedy these days?
Wow, God has been faithful to me, Andy. I have seen it, your latter days are better than your early days. Sometimes that's hard to understand because it sounds like Bible talk, but for me, I think it's been like this season of challenging, training, learning, developing, growing, healing, and then all of a sudden, wow, it's like the doors have opened. So I'm excited. I'm doing some travel, a lot of travel and speaking. I love doing that, share my story, share hope. Doing some international things, doing some conferences. I'll be going to Vienna, Austria in just a few weeks. And I'm just looking forward to some really neat things that God's doing there. Along with that, though, something I'm thrilled about is I'm getting the opportunity to work with younger women. I don't know if you remember, you guys were there. I ran my first 5K when I turned 50. And I thoroughly loved that. But during that 5K, I felt like God challenged me to make the most. I want to end well. I've got to make the most of my time. And so I asked God to give me 5,000 younger women before I go to heaven that I can invest in their lives. And I didn't know how he was going to do it. I had no idea, but I just knew I was going to shoot for that. I was going to have that as a goal. And now God has opened an opportunity. I'm working with a group called Let's Echo. They're awesome. She brings in about 30 or 40 young women at a time. I get to go in and speak into their lives. I get to see them trained and developed and raised up to go out and do what I do and share their stories. And I'm beyond thrilled about that. Getting ready to kick off a podcast myself, hopefully starting in January. I'm gonna try to kick one off. I know a lot kick off in January. I may have to push it to February, but I'm going to shoot for January. So I'll have to bring you on then.
Oh man, I would be honored. Well, I can't think of anyone better to be leading these young ladies. That is so cool. And so, with that said, I usually wait till the end, but in case someone just heard that and they're already grabbed by their heart, how do they find out more information about that? How do they connect with you?
Okay. They can connect with me through judykennedy.net. They can email me at Judy, Judy, at mustangcreek.org. That's the church I work out of. They actually send me out as an evangelist. I love it here. Mustang Creek is Mustang like the horse, Creek like the river. It's real easy.
It is easy, and I love that. And you two are phenomenal. You and Pastor Robert, just love you guys so much. I remember, I'll never forget this day when we got the diagnosis of Peyton, and just we had been going through test after test after test, and we knew that eventually we were going to find out, I guess, a diagnosis. Yes, but at that time, I first call we made was to my dad. My dad was still living at the time, and he always prayed over us. And so we're driving home, and he prayed over us. And then we came by the office there at the church, and saw your cars were still there. And so we just pulled in, and you and Pastor Robert, y'all prayed over us, and it was just so special. I hinted at this earlier. Couldn't think of going through that under any other pastors, because unfortunately we had been through some hurt in the church, and it's not to we're very careful not to shame his bride, but there were just some heartaches through ministry, unfortunately, and you two were always an amazing example for us. I know you have a story as well. Would you care to dive into, I guess we'll take it back. You're an author. I talked about that. Your book, Holy Crap, that's one of them. But that book shares your personal story. It shares all the things that you went through. And will you dive into some of that? Dive into your story from your childhood, even, and we can pick it up later at other places. But some of the things you went through personally that I think really set you up to be the perfect example for us, because you have lived through heartache and you've seen what happens. And just dive into that, please.
Well, I will. First, I had a memory when you were talking. I want to share this. I think it's beautiful. I don't know if you recall, but Peyton was just inside the office door, and I was kneeling down, helping getting her tucked in, and we were going to get her out to the car. You guys had gone out to the car and left a little monitor thing on her, and I was just talking to her and praying over her, just my heart, just breaking before God for her, and y'all heard me, and I was so embarrassed. But then I thought, you know what? They need to know how much I love them and this baby. And it's just one of those things. When you think about church hurt, it's always been my goal to love people that are with me while they're with me, and be able to release them when they go, so that they can remember me with calm fondness, without remembering me with pain. And I really try to do that. So I've asked God to do that. So that's aside. Let me tell you something. God is scandalous in his love toward me. Everything that ever happened to me in my entire life set me up for such a time as this. Now, I have to preface, when I start to tell people just pieces of my story, I have to tell them, wait, I want to make sure you understand. I'm not saying God did this to me. I'm saying God in his wisdom knew where he was taking me. And his plan was to use all of the things that were happening for his glory. But sin brought death. Death brought absolute devastation to my life. So with that said, here's my story. I'm going to stick to it and go real fast. Do you have a question before I do?
No, you're fine.
All right.
As you tell your story, it may jog other memories and questions, but yeah, take it away.
Interrupt me. That's fine. I don't mind at all. I shared with you already. I'm ADD. I interrupt. I say, look, I'm ADD. It works for me. I can chase squirrels, come right back. I'm real good at that. So we're just going to do it. All right. So here's the deal. When I was born, I was an absolute surprise to my mom. I was born into the home of an extreme, severe alcoholic father. My dad was one of the very worst. And if he was drinking really heavy, it put us in danger. Most of the time, he was gone when I was a child, out drinking somewhere. We really didn't know. But when I was born, my mom, now this was a long time ago, no jokes, it was a long time ago, but they did not do like sonograms and all of that back then. And science had not really progressed as fast as it has now. And so my mom was extremely large, but they didn't know why. They took her in to deliver the baby. They delivered a bouncing baby boy. Now, this isn't one of those stories. But they delivered a boy, and then they said, oh no, wait a minute, there's another one. And they grabbed my foot and pulled me out. Surprise. And I love to say I was a surprise to my mom, but I was a surprise to the doctor, but I was a surprise to my whole family, but I was not a surprise to God. He was there forming me, preparing me, putting into me my Enneagram 7, my otterishness. He was creating in me in that moment what I would need to succeed today. And so, boom, there I am, born into absolute devastation and chaos.
I love that. And I'm sorry, I would jump in, but I had forgot about that part, that you are a fellow twin.
Yeah.
Yes, and we have twins now too. It all goes full circle. But I didn't mean to interrupt, but I absolutely love your story. And you're handing hadn't even got to the tip of the iceberg yet. So for those who may be looking for hope today, I will come back with that. Dive in. What's next?
Okay.
Take us through the rest of your child. I don't know if this is around your teenage years or maybe early childhood, but you were hurt and abused. I
There
don't
were
know
a
if
lot
that's
of
where you were
things that
going
happened.
next, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I was born into the home of an alcoholic, and the reason I'm telling you this is because later in my story, you'll see how God used even that. That brought extreme poverty to the point that I know what it is like to have only a catch-up package for dinner. I know what it's like to have no working plumbing in my home, no heat, no air. I know what it's like to do without to the maximum level and hide it, because children of alcoholics, they have a sacred secret. They don't want the world to know they're different, but they know they're different. And so it really created in us a lot of things. My dad was really strange. There were actually 6 children in our home. So my dad would come home late at night, maybe 3 a.m, get us all up, and we would have to sing songs out of the church songbook. And we would sing, all 6 of us sing all night till the sun came up. Then we would go to school. And so a lot of people don't understand that children come from a place they know nothing about, and that it is so sacred and secret they'll never know. So child protective services did not exist, so they could not protect us. So it was just one of those things where I really believe it influenced me for such a time as this, because now I help people see that. I get to go in and teach teachers how to spot children that are coming from that kind of home, because I lived it. And I get to help them see that. And God's used that for his glory. You keep going, children of alcoholics that grow up in that environment have a low self-esteem, desire to be seen. I felt invisible all my life, always. I was lost in the crowd. And so I was 14 years old. My sister took me to the skating rink. She paid a young guy $5 to skate with me, because it was one of those little couple skates and I never got picked. So she paid him $5. So he picked me. And by the end of that night, I was in love, ready to be married, because somebody saw me. And so I convinced my mom I was mature enough to go on a date. So he takes me out. On my first date, I was raped violently, and some really horrendous things followed. For the next 6 months, I was abused, tormented, tortured, guns held to my head, horrible things physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually. I endured for about 6 months until my mom came in, saw the bruises on my body after 6 months, and ended that, called the police, had a big thing. So that affected me extremely. That caused PTSD at an undiagnosed level.
I can't imagine. Cannot imagine. And I'm lucky. I got to see Pastor Judy years later. And so
Yeah.
that's why when I see you as this dynamic, powerful speaker and leader and pastor and author and all the things, I can't even imagine seeing your backstory. It, it's almost like a Hollywood movie, so to speak. It's like unbelievable. Like,
I'm hoping the Lord's going to
so
let me make a series. I used to
let's
think I
do
wanted
it.
to do a movie, but now I want to do a series.
A series are more fun because the movies they're over with in an hour and a half or 2 hours, but the series you can
Yeah.
dive into those very good. Well, absolutely love your story, and it's there's more. Unfortunately, I guess unfortunately or fortunately, but there's more
Yeah.
to it.
There's
Uh,
just too much to tell in a few minutes, but
yeah,
I can't help you understand how devastating it can be. And you know, just like you guys, you and Tiffany have experienced trauma.
yeah,
Uh, I've got some counselors, some people I meet with, and it's called complex trauma, and it caused PTSD for me because in that period of time, there were also a lot of chaotic, violent things happening in my home. I saw at the age of 8, I saw my brother stabbed 14 times. I've seen violent, horrendous things that I should not have experienced, but I saw them for a reason.
yeah,
Then my mom goes to the church. Please help me. I'm worried. I'm 14. Remember, I've just come from this horrible abusive situation. Please help my daughter. We're really worried about her. So they find a sponsor, somebody in the church that would, you know, come and help this poor little needy child at the alcoholic's home. And so that the couple comes and picks me up, takes me to dinner, tell me how much they care about me. They're going to be there for me and help me get through this hard time. They did that every Tuesday for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then the 5th week or so, he came, but she didn't. And within a few more weeks, I'm in a full-blown affair with a married youth sponsor at my church. He wasn't the youth pastor. He was a youth sponsor, but he then controlled my life for the next 5 years. Everything in my life was controlled by making sure he did not get mad. And he you know, literally, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, sexually abused me in every way you can think of, inside the church, pastor's office, nursery, Sunday school, everywhere. And it affected how I saw God and holiness and reality and truth. And I mean, you can only imagine how messed up I was by that point. But God is rich in mercy and faithful to us. And he sees us even in those extreme, dark, things you cannot understand or explain. In those moments, I always knew he loved me. I knew he was
yeah,
with me. I wanted to believe he was real. But I
yeah,
have to be honest, Andy, there were very often times when I questioned, is everything I thought I believed really true?
yeah. And that's what I was going to ask you next. And we can always, because there's there is more. Believe it or not, if you're listening, you're thinking, wow, there can't be more. Well, guess what? There's more. But I did want to ask you, so we can bounce back if we need to, but because you may have to jump back to the future. But how did you keep your faith, or how did you find a closeness to God when you went through all those things? I would think for the average person, it would be very easy to run from God. How is it, the redemption story for you? How did it work?
Well, I remembered something over and over. I was reminded my mother was a precious saint. My dad was absolutely lost, but my mom loved God so much and tried so hard to really instill that in us. And so I literally remembered my mom saying, when you're scared, when you're afraid, all you have to do is speak the name of Jesus. Just Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. I remember curling up in a blanket. My dad would be violent in the other room. I'd hear him putting his fist through walls, and I would be covered with a blanket saying, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And in those moments, I experienced true peace, Andy, a peace that I can't put words to. And so just that much interaction with the presence of God affected my ability to believe, well, wait, I know there's something to this. And so I found myself intentionally, mentally deciding, look, everything else has failed me. I've got to come to a place where something's real. So I would begin to just speak the name of Jesus. And God, I really believe people miss the fact that it is a spiritual thing. You know, it's not like Halloween, woo, spooky, but it
Yeah,
really is a true, intense, it's an experience I want everyone to know,
yeah,
where absolute turmoil is erased by the calm peace of God that no one understands. And literally all through that, God was with me and he helped me. And so for me, I had to intentionally decide. It wasn't like some transformational moment. I decided I've got to have God. I'm going to lose my mind. And in that, I was able to find God and be united with my sweet husband. And in my 20th year is when we married, and we determined we're going to follow God. And I wish, Andy, I could say, oh, and it was just happily ever after. But the
Well,
enemy
that's what I
don't
was going to
mind.
ask you. Yeah, no, he does. And I do believe and I know you kind of said that jokingly and maybe you didn't, but
No.
I do believe he meant, because he saw what was ahead. He knew what a threat you were to his kingdom or whatever
Yeah.
you want to call that.
Yeah.
And he knew if his best chance is I got to get her now. I can't let her become who she's going to be.
Right.
Wow. So then you meet Pastor Robert, and exactly, it wasn't all roses in the beginning.
Yeah.
So
A lot of
tell me a
people
little bit of
think,
that.
yeah, a lot of people think, oh, well, good, at least something good happened in her life. And, something good happened. But I wish I could tell you that my Prince Charming was, it was the end and he was Mr. Everything. But, the truth is, we're just humans and we know God and we try to follow God, but there are things that out of our control absolutely bring devastation. And again, I believe with all my heart there was a plan to take me out over and over. I believe that plan is still in effect, so I'm aware of it. I don't let it, take me out. But Pastor and I, we struggled. Obviously, he was so young. I hesitate to say how young he was, but when I married him, of course, I matured fast because I lived through hell on earth, right? So I was 20 and he was 17, still in high school. But I just knew. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. And God was faithful. We were married. And then he ran from God for a while and he got into drugs and alcohol. He began to hang out with the wrong people and make wrong decisions. And he was unfaithful to me. And there were things that they ravaged my heart. But at some point, I had to decide I want life. And I want this life, and I have to believe that God can rescue us. So we recommitted to our marriage. We finally decided, I wish I could tell you, Andy, when we had these people all around us and they were helping us. But honestly, I look back and I think, we just were desperate. We held on to each other. I hear you say that a lot. I love your book, When Words Don't Come Easy. Oh my gosh, I read it and then I listened to it and I cried and cried and cried. But I hear you say over and over how you and Tiffany just held on to each other. And that's kind of what we had to do.
Yeah.
Even when we were mad at each other,
Yeah.
we had, this is it.
And that makes so much sense. It does when you're when you're going through so much,
Yeah.
even if it's not perfect, it's all you have, right? You have the Lord, he's with you, but sometimes we can't see him. He never leaves us nor forsakes us. But I know when we take our eyes off, got like Peter walking
Oh
on the
yeah.
water, right? Or he walked on the water a few steps, and so many people are quick to oh, well, look at him, he fell or whatever. But he was the only one with faith to jump out of the
To
boat.
get
I
out and
do
walk
love
on the
that.
water.
Yeah, and try it. But then he took his eyes off God, and then all of a sudden he saw his problems around him, and he saw all the waves and things around him. That's what I
Absolutely.
think about so much. Is God never left us. He was there the whole time. It's just we took our eyes off and lost focus. You have so much wisdom. I'm not saying that to butter you up. Me and Tiff say this all the time. Of all the people we've been surrounded with through our life, and so many people God has put in our life, we are so blessed for you to be in our life. And there's more to the story, but I do want to take a pause here and say, what would you encourage from a marriage standpoint, or even as a parent, uh, how to make your marriage better, or how to parent these godly little children that we've been blessed with? Uh, so many people can learn so much from you. Will you tell us something to help us in either of those
Absolutely.
situations?
I
Yeah.
I love that. One of the books that I wrote, I'm not pushing my books, but one of the books that I wrote is called Just Judy. And it is just simply like people wrote like, Dear Just Judy, what do I do when, blah, blah, blah. And I absolutely love this, but here's what I learned very young. And I really want to encourage anyone listening. The Bible says, in all of your getting and everything that you get wisdom. And wisdom is available. Wisdom cries out in the streets. Wisdom screams out to us and calls out to us, come here, I've got something good for you. Come here. And so when I was first married, I grabbed everything I could find to read about how to be a good wife and how to have a good marriage. And I reached out for everything I could grasp, because knowledge is amazing. But the use of knowledge, you can know how to do it, but if you don't use it, it's just knowledge. The use of knowledge is wisdom.
It is so good. And we talk about it all the time, the action behind it, right? It means nothing if you have the knowledge, but that is so
You don't
good.
use it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you and Pastor Judy, you are Pastor Judy, you and Pastor Robert, you guys
All right.
get
Call me
through
what you call me.
y'all get through some of the rough early years. When was it that you saw the shift, and when was it that he received the calling to jump into ministry? And was that easy at first for you? Did you just feel the calling as well? Did y'all both just jump into it? How did that
Well,
go?
we went through some really, I will tell you, Andy, this is the part that if you ask me which one of all the attacks, devastation in my life that took me out, this was the one that almost took me out. We were married. We made a decision to try hard to follow God, and we were expecting our first son and thrilled and excited about that. For me, every man in my life had failed me. Every man, my dad, my youth pastors, my youth workers, my pastor, all of them had failed me extreme. Even my husband, I loved him, but he had failed me. But now I'm going to have a son. And somehow in my heart, I felt like I will be whole when I have a son. I think there's a problem because we spend our life saying, when I'll be whole, when I have this, when I get married, when I have a job, when I have money, when I have kids. Wholeness comes from one source, and that's only through God. And the wholeness that he brings restores marriages and sustains us, like Peter in the storm. And oh my gosh, I got a great story about that, but I don't have time to tell you. But anyway, the truth is, we had our little boy. We went to I had him. He was born October 8, 1983. We loved having a boy. He was so precious. And I call him Pastor, but Robert, my husband, had little matching Dallas Cowboy and Texas Ranger outfits. And he had his little bitty one and his big, and it was just precious, just a precious thing. At 2 weeks, though, we went in for his follow-up just to make sure he's doing well. And they sent us to Children's Medical Center, which you're very familiar with. 6th floor, Dr. David Fixler. I'll never forget it as long as I live. It was one of those moments kind of like you guys had sitting across from the doctors when they were telling you about Peyton and everything. And Dr. Fixler leaned in and he said, I'm really sorry, but your son has a very serious heart defect, and there's nothing that we can do. And so, in your mind, it's like you're not hearing, but you're hearing, but you're like in shock mode. And we were trying to figure it out, but there was no way to fix our son. At that point, what he had was aortic atresia, hyperplasia left heart. And that meant that the left side of his heart did not work at all. There was a hole in his heart, but also the heart just didn't function. So they said he would die in, just a little while, maybe a few days, maybe, a week, but he continued to live for quite a while. So then they sent us home from the hospital. Our son, Zach, lived for 14 months. They could not believe it. They were bringing in people from Australia and England just to study, how is this child living with only half of his heart working? Well, we assumed God's doing a miracle. All of a sudden, you can get real spiritual when you're scared to death. You can. And we were just like, yes, God's going to do a miracle. At 14 months, there was so much happened, but just for sake of time, there was a lot of pressure in his heart. They took him in to release some pressure. During that surgery, our son died. In that moment, I think that was the moment I questioned everything, everything I ever knew about God in that moment.
And I talk about this in the book, but that's okay.
It
I
is.
didn't know that for the longest. And so I would share that to everyone who's
You
watching or
feel
listening.
guilty.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
you feel
do.
like,
You're like,
what?
who am
But
I to question God, right? But
right.
we're human. You already mentioned that, and it is okay. And the story, and I had heard this 1,000 times, maybe not really, but it felt like 1,000 times. Growing up, I grew up in church. I mean, we were there all of the time.
Mhm.
I was a drug baby. I tell people that I was drugged to church all the time. We Sundays, Sunday nights, we had revivals back then that would go Monday through Friday nights. We had Wednesday night church. I mean, we were in church. So I've heard the stories, but I remember the Lazarus story, and I share about it in the book. But there's one verse that jumped out at me so much, and it says, "I am right now." And I go into greater detail, and this isn't about me, but it correlates with our stories here. And even when they're questioning God, like, where were you? Where were you? You guys were close. We were close. I thought you had my back, right? After everything you've been through, Pastor Judy, I mean, all the stuff that he's brought you out of, you thought, at least you could. I can't put words in your mouth. This is what I felt with Peyton. At least you could have my back here,
Yeah.
right?
I
And
remember
so
that moment with God. I can tell you, Zach passed away on November 21st, 1984, right at the holidays. I did not have, what am I going to be thankful for at Thanksgiving? It was just a devastating thing. By the time Christmas came, that's the dark hour. That's when I wanted to die. That was my suicide moment. I, I just couldn't take any more. I'm like, I don't know what I ever did. But you know what? Listen, Andy, Job, man, he went through a lot, right? And then everybody goes, always remember Job. But listen, Job got to have a hissy fit. Sorry, I like to call it a hissy fit because
it's
he got
true.
to
Yeah.
stomp his feet and say, I don't know where God is. If I could
Yeah.
find him, if I had 5 minutes with God, I would tell him what I think. And I had those moments. Is he real? Because if he's real, I got something to say. I want to tell him what I think. It's okay to even be angry at God. Job did. He said, if I had 5 minutes. But one thing that always happens is that there's that moment where you come to your senses. And I was sitting under a Christmas tree all by myself, looking up at the lights and asking, is any of this real? I mean, seriously, God, if you're really God, is any of this real? And as clear as I can tell you, no, it wasn't an audible, booming voice, but I know God said to me, he called me by name, Judy, I gave my only son to you at Christmas so that you could see your only son again forever. And in that moment, it started to make a little sense. I don't know why. That was that Jesus, Jesus, Jesus moment of comfort and peace. And oh, yeah. So now, even at Christmas, when I see tidings of comfort and joy, that's what comfort is. It's the blessed hope that Jesus is baby in a manger. It's not all about all that. It's about the life he bought for us when he was born and lived and struggled and died.
Yeah.
And man, the beauty of that, the comfort that brings, and the joy. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm a little crazy, but I got reason to be happy, baby. Let me tell you.
Yes, and you are Judy Christmas Kennedy, for those
That's
who
right.
don't
Don't
know.
you forget it.
She does Christmas like nobody else, and she celebrates it because it is a huge time of celebration.
It
The
is.
end of that verse that has jumped out at me, what we were sharing,
Mhm.
Jesus wept, right? So he's big enough to take the questions. He knew in my scenario, he knew with Lazarus, he was about to go raise him up. He wasn't even worried about that part, but yet he still took the time to weep with us because we didn't know. We didn't know. I didn't know all the things going on at the time. And yes, I had my hissy fit too. That's what I love. Our stories are very similar. I sometimes I think I went through a lot, and then I hear your story. I'm like, oh my goodness. But God has been faithful through it all.
He
So
has.
faithful. So you just touched on all that. Now look at you guys. How long have y'all been in ministry, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind you asking. We became youth pastors in 1987. We youth pastor for 5 years. We have now served in ministry We've been married 41 years. For 38 years of the 41 years, we have been in ministry. I wish I could tell you that, Andy, after the Lord restored my heart with our son, that, and I never had any more trouble. But I'm going to be honest with you. There's not just like, okay, well, check, you've suffered enough. That doesn't happen. I've been in inpatient in the hospital 29 times within 10 years. I was in the hospital with major surgery. I've had 14 major surgeries, reconstruction, 4 times diagnosed with bladder cancer, 4 times that's a lie. God has taken me from stroke after stroke, and I have come back again saying, listen, devil, you might as well give up, because every breath in my body will be spent paying him back for everything he throws at me. So he's just stirring it up. I'm ready to go.
I love that. I love it. And so even with that, and these are all the big things, these are giant things, but that's not even counting the day-to-day just hurts that happen. You're not immune to it just because you're in ministry. I'd like to say that, as so many people don't realize, gosh, the backstab and the gossip, there's just things behind. There are some really good people who uplift you and support you and pray for you, but then there's always, because the devil is never, he doesn't stop. So what is it for you that just, and I know that, I guess the easy answer is staying faithful to God, but what is it that keeps you going, that keeps you focused on what's the most important through hard times, through trials?
Jesus endured suffering, considering the joy that was set before him. And so I think sometimes what we have to do is we have to recognize, look, I'm in the world, but he knew this was going to happen. So he said, listen, in the world, man, it's going to be ugly. Some of you're going to have some crap to deal with. Some of you are really going to have some hard stuff. And I want you to know it's okay, because I've overcome this. There is an end. There's an appointed end to all of it. And I hold on knowing it's okay. I can endure this because there's an appointed end. God has got me, but there has to come a point. Now, listen, in church ministry, for me, I love hard. I just do. I love so hard. And I really wished I didn't. I know that sounds bad, but when everyone becomes my child. After our son died, we had 2 beautiful children. They are amazing kids. You know them. They are my shining examples that God is faithful. And I can't brag about them enough, so I'm not even going to start, but just trust me, they're joy to me. But I know without a doubt that God's plans and purposes for me are good. It doesn't matter what happens. He's going to get glory for that thing. He is going to take every broken piece of my life and get glory for it. So now I get to use all of those things. I get to go in and hold the hand of a mom who's just been told your child is going to die. And I get to sit there and help them. I get to help little girls understand alcoholism and how that's not really your dad. He's under the influence of something that's holding on to him. And how to help them not hate and despise the very broken things that have come against them, knowing that God, his plans and his purposes for all of us are good. Looking at you now, Andy, for my heart breaking for you guys, man, I thought I can't take any more for them, but watching how God has, man, he has given you a platform to share the absolute amazing wonders of God, and how faithful you guys are to do that. I just believe he already knew, and he's like, it's okay, I got this, I promise. But it's hard for us to hear it, isn't it? In ministry, you have to believe you're called and appointed by God. When you begin to walk in your calling, now, obviously, you can go to this whole walk worthy of your calling. Yes, there is a place of full commitment in that. But walking in your calling, man, the moment I began to speak to crowds, it didn't matter if there was 10 or 10,000. I don't mind. That experience where we've both spoke to huge crowds or small crowds, but something comes alive on the inside. And you're like, man, I could do this until I die. That moment when you find the appointed purpose of your life, lock the door. I'm good. I can handle that, because you just wait. It's going to sound real good coming out of my mouth.
That is so awesome. And I love your story so much. I thank you so much for taking the time. One, I know you're a very busy person, but jumping on here to give hope to so many people. again, where can someone find out more about? And please tell me about your books. I know about Just Judy. I know about Holy Crap, which is phenomenal. And I want you to explain Holy Crap too
Okay.
for those who may just hear the title and be shocked. I absolutely love the title because it brings everybody in. They're like, okay, I want to know more about this Holy Crap. Kind of an oxymoron, right? But I
Yeah.
love it. And then your book for your son, I
Okay.
can't remember the title. Tell me all about that, and then how to find that, and how to
Okay.
find you again for your other what you're doing now in your ministry for. I forget the name of it. I'm so sorry for
It's all right. It's fine.
women.
It's fine.
Yes.
All right. First of all, let me say this because I don't ever want to miss an opportunity. And I just really feel like the
Yes.
Lord asking me to say this. So listen, I need people to know there is nothing that will ever happen to you in your life that God cannot, one, rescue you out of, redeem the time and the things that have been taken from you, restore every piece of the brokenness, and bring wholeness to the things that don't make sense. He can do that. I'm living proof. I am a walking trophy of grace that God saw, picked it up, put it back together, and he can do the same for everybody else. When I sat down, all of those things that I wrote in my, and this is just the first, I'm getting ready to do a revision on the book, Holy Crap. Okay. The reason why is I want to bring some updates into it and help people see the continuation of the story. But when I got ready to title the book, I needed to title. I had to get it to the publishers pretty quick. And I'm asking God, okay, God, I have to have a name for this book. But I wrote this book not for the church, but for the lost. So I was out at a really nice little cabin. I was walking around. I was trying to finish up. I was saying to God, I don't know what to call this. I need you to help me with a creative name for my story. And I just kept, and I'm just not, listen, be real with God. I just can't stand when people start saying, oh, holy omnipotent one. And come on, he knows my crap. I could just talk to him like I'm talking to Andy. He's my friend. And I'm just saying, God, it's all this crap that I went through. And I don't know how I survived it when I look at this and it's all this, and somehow you've taken it and made it holy and you're using it for holy purposes, God. And eventually I came around to the point of saying, it's holy crap. And then I realized, oh, can I get by with that? So I had a lot of friends that I talked to, and I said, listen, I feel like God wants me to call the story Holy Crap, and that I think I'm going to do it. Oh, they're all my good preacher friends, they're, oh, Judy, I'm worried you're going to limit your opportunities and those books won't sell. I'm not trying to reach the church. I want to reach broken, hurting, lost people who need to know there's a God. He loves you. He can fix you. And if he don't fix you, he can make it all right. Look
And
at me.
that's so good. And we had some landscapers. I'm gonna let you finish, please.
No,
But
go
we had some
ahead.
landscapers come by the house the other day, and Tiff and I walked out. I think we were going to lunch or dinner, but we walked out our door, and I was like, "What is that smell?" And they were spreading, and it was right by our front door. I'm like, couldn't they have done that anywhere else? But they were
Mhm,
putting fertilizer in
mhm,
because they were planting brand new flowers and all the beautiful things.
mhm,
And fertilizer, the holy crap that we have to go through, right? How divine that is
mhm,
when we see the life that grew out of all of that just crap that you went through. And I don't wish that on nobody. I'm not saying that, even like you pointed out earlier, that God didn't do this to you, that he's
mhm.
just making the most out of this. But
Right.
when you see the life that has birthed and grew through this fertilizer, of lack of better words, that you had to
Absolutely.
go through, it's just a beautiful story. But anyway, so sorry. Continue,
No, that's
please.
okay. It's true. And that's what I say. God, can you use this crap as fertilizer in the lives of other people? So here's what I ended up doing. Just long story short, I kind of compromised and I released the book under two titles, Divine Dysfunction and Holy Crap. And so when I go to speak, even when I do podcasts, anything I do, anywhere I go, I give the opportunity. I don't, listen, I know everyone's not like me. You know what? I can pull this off because I don't care. That's just me. I'm going to be real. But there's some people who feel like they've got to guard things or what. I'm not going to judge them. They got to do what they got to do. So I offer, listen, I don't have to bring, I have Holy Crap t-shirts. I mean, I got the whole thing, but I don't have to bring any of that merch. I can just bring, just Divine Dysfunction, because that's the other book. It's Divine Dysfunction. I can bring that. No problem. I won't use the words Holy Crap. I'll protect you. No big deal. I sell Holy Crap 10 to 1 over that other one. I mean, it's no question. It isn't. And so even after that, I published it with TBN, and, it's available on Amazon. The rest of my books are not. Holy Crap is available on Amazon. It's a smaller portion, but it's still the whole story. So, you would enjoy it. But anyway, so I wrote that. Then after that, I wrote a book called Who Washed the Sky. That's the one on my son. And it just simply helps people understand how to deal with grief and processes that you can take. It's not like when your child just dies, no one can hand me a book this thick and expect that I'm going to read that and be restored. It's a tiny little book, not even 100 pages. I mean, it's not a lot of pages, but it talks about eat something, when people are finally gone, don't sleep 24 hours a day. Let's take one step at a time, one piece at a time. Do, like you said, 1 minute at a time. Let's overcome that way, And so the book now, I'm able to see God take it, and it's in packages in a couple of hospitals that send it home with the moms whose children have died, and it offers hope and tells them there is a God, and he offers us comfort. So that's what that book is, Who Washed the Sky. The third book that I really loved was called Chasing Legacy. It's the one I wrote after my 50th birthday, and it's the one where I really encourage people of all ages. Listen, get up and be about the thing you were created to do. Live, don't watch. We've got a generation that's walking around like this, Andy. They're missing life that's happening out here because they're stuck watching everyone live. And I'm screaming, live, stop. Yes, it's time for the world to change, and you're the one to change it. Stop waiting for the world to change, but change it. So that's what that one's about. And then I wrote a Bible study with some other pastors' wives called Big Girl Pants, and it just talks about applying the wisdom of Proverbs to our lives, and it's a real good small group kind of study. I enjoyed that. So in writing all those books, I realized my love for writing, and I recognize good writers. Mr. Andy Howard, when's the next book coming?
I hear that so much, and right now, and you may understand this, I am just so relieved to have the first one. And I feel like I poured my whole heart and soul into this book. But at the same time, I will say I've been getting speaking engagements and opportunities, and I'm hoping there are new stories that birth from now this book going out, because I feel like every story I had went into this book, but I know God's not done with me, so there will be new stories come along, and He will provide the rest.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much, Pastor Judy, for doing this, for being vulnerable, for sharing your story. You've always been that way. That's why Tiff and I, I think that's one of the areas where we grew so much. And even in the beginning, we came to you guys very raw. Y'all took a chance on us. Looking back, I probably wouldn't have hired us as youth pastors, but y'all did. And we were so raw. And one of the first things you taught us that we have taken with, you talked about our platform we have now. We took this principle, and it was the spirit of excellence. And you taught us how to, there was many times early on where we're like, we finished. That's good enough. That's good. That'll get the job done, which is great, right? There's nothing wrong with getting the job done. But then you guys were like, wow, what if we did it with a spirit of excellence in everything we do? And so we have tried to take that principle in every facet of our life. And that's what's led to where we're at today, by taking that spirit of excellence. So I thank you for pouring into us and so many others along the way. Yes.
In ministry, it's good to know, Andy, that there is fruit that remains, that things that we sowed, we do get. And listen, you asked me, how do you keep going? This is my final thing to say, but how do you keep going in ministry? How do you keep going? Yes, you are hurt. Yes, there are people who talk about you. Yes, there are people who leave and, oh, you're just the worst. But there are so many more where you begin to see, now we're old enough, we see mom and dad and their children and their children. And we see that there is a seed of righteousness that is rising up because we were willing to sow and sow and sow. And you guys are so amazing. Y'all were a gift to us more than you'll ever know. Still a gift to us for sure. But wow, it's just been a great journey with you guys. We love you more than you'll ever know.
Well, thank you. We love you too. And still so fun, you and Pastor. I read one quote, and this is how we're going to end it because I think it fits your story so well. And I don't know if it's from Toby Mac himself or if it's one of his people on his team that put this out, but I was just scrolling through Facebook as I got up this morning, and it said, never let your fear decide your future.
Mm,
And I think about your story, and I thought, wow, this is so perfect. It would have been
that's
so easy.
amazing.
It would have
Absolutely.
been so easy for you to quit, Pastor Judy. In fact, people would have even understood it. They would have even gave you a pass and all the things. So, well, look at her, bless her heart. And it's the truth. We do feel that so much sympathy for everything you went through. But look at you now.
Paul
And you're
said
a
that. Paul said,
champion.
look, I've been through all this stuff, but you know, I comfort others with the comfort I've received. And
Amen.
so if I can do that, it's done. I'm good. I want to finish well. And I want to see
Yes.
sons and daughters like you and Tiffany go
Oh,
ahead and finish well. Do it
we
all for
all want
God's
that.
glory and finish well.
If we could all do that, wow, what a better place this would be. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, Pastor Judy. This is another edition of the When Words Don't Come Easy podcast. If this has been a blessing to you, in fact, as she was sharing her story, there was someone that probably came on your heart that you're like, I wish I could hear this. Will you please forward this episode to them? Let this be not just our story, but let it be hope for others. And please share the podcast. If you've enjoyed it, subscribe, like it. Thank you for being here. And this is the end of another beautiful episode. God bless everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If this episode helped you in any way, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review and share it with somebody else. Thanks so much. I'll catch you next time.